Hello and welcome to Hamilton the Podcast. From the Graphmania Podcast Network, I'm Vinton Bain.
And I saw Hamilton.
He saw Hamilton, everybody.
I guess I got a little ahead of myself. Yes, I'm Robbie Herlocker, and I saw Hamilton live.
And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Now, right up front at the beginning of this episode, I will inform you that we have a major, large, bigly, maybe even, announcement to
Don't
make.
go there. Don't
but
give
we're
him that.
going to put it after we talk about Hamilton.
Yes.
So stay tuned, or if you just want to hear the announcement, I guess you can fast forward and find it.
Right.
Can't tell you a timestamp because we haven't done it yet.
We haven't made the announcement yet, but it is a big announcement. It's a huge one. It's
A
huge.
huge one.
It's huge.
I'm Alexander Hamilton. Oh man, I slipped and let it go. Sorry, guys. Turns
Well,
out.
there's the podcast.
Moving on past ridiculous jokes that aren't probably funny. Robbie, you went on a trip, like we mentioned that you were going to do. Tell us about your trip.
So, yeah, Liz and I went to DC and then New York City. So we took the toddler with us. We dropped her off with Liz's parents. They live right outside of Washington, D.C. on the Virginia side, near Dulles Airport. I almost said Dulles Air Force Base, but it's an airport, I promise. And so we let the toddler stay there for a few days while we then traveled up to New York City, spent a couple days there, came back, pick up the toddler, came back to Oklahoma City, and got to see you again.
Yeah.
That was the trip.
highlight of the trip.
That was the highlight of the trip.
Seeing me again.
Seeing you. You dropped us off. You picked us up. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah,
so
you're
much.
welcome.
Getting up super early, ridiculously early for a Saturday, and then driving us to the airport. That was very, very kind.
My favorite part of picking you up was I got a really cool Hamilton button from our friend June.
June is the cutest, isn't she?
She's amazing.
She was so fun to watch Hamilton with, and she was great.
So extending my gratitude on the podcast. Thank you for that amazing button.
Absolutely.
So did you get to see any cool sights while you were gone?
Sure. Yeah, I was in DC during December, so I didn't do a lot of sightseeing there this trip.
Right.
It was mainly a stopping point, getting to see her family and spending some time at their house. But when I went to New York City, that leg of the trip, our first day there, we had a number of things planned out, but we had a 4.5-hour delay.
Yeah.
And that was really frustrating to get. So anyways, our first day was almost a wash. We got there and then we had to go straight to the hotel, get everything unpacked, and essentially loaded up and dressed up and went straight to this little show you may have heard of called Waitress.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that one.
I actually
think it won some awards or something.
Yeah, I've been so excited about Waitress. This is a show I had on pre-order when they announced that they were going to do the original cast album.
Yeah.
I've been listening to the music forever. I've been excited about it. It's been a big deal. Sarah Bareilles' musical is wonderful, and now she's actually she is starring in it. She took some time off. Someone else was fulfilling the role for a while, but she is on Broadway. I didn't get to see her though. She took the role a couple days after our visit. But you know what? I have heard recordings of Sarah Bareilles sing this. I hadn't heard recordings of Stephanie Torrens singing any of the music. And wow, she is so good. I'm glad that I got to see the cast that was performing Waitress that night, because they were just so wonderful. And it was beautiful. It's also worth noting that since we've spent so much of our lives, the two of us, analyzing and unpacking Hamilton, an American musical, I knew what I was going to get going into Hamilton. I knew the music of Waitress, and I knew as much as you could get out of the Wikipedia article about Waitress the musical. And so I knew the plot lines. I had seen scenes on YouTube, and I'd heard Sarah Bareilles sing some little ditties about her musical, and I'd heard some of her music before, obviously. And I had seen the performance at the Tonys that with Jesse Mueller and the cast there performing from Waitress, and it was so, so lovely, so wonderful. But I wouldn't have been able to see Stephanie Torrens do the role if I wasn't there that night. It was kind of neat.
Yeah.
It's always fun to go into live theater not knowing exactly what it is you're getting out of it. Like, when you go to the movie theater, you know the celebrities you're going to see on screen most of the time.
Right.
But when you get to see something live and you get to see someone else capture the role, it's really kind of a fun experience for me, at least. I mean, I know a lot of people that are just really disappointed that they haven't gotten to see the celebrity on stage, but
Right.
that's not the point of theater. Theater lives longer than the celebrity does,
Yeah.
and I like that about it.
Yeah, aside from seeing bands in concert, I don't think I've ever seen like a celebrity on stage performing really. So I'm used to like going to local theater performances and seeing
Yeah.
people I have no idea who they are, or I have a friend in the show or
Right.
something like that. So I'm not even sure what it feels like to go to the theater and be like, oh man, I'm so excited to see this person.
Right. Speaking of local talent and just up and comers that you do not recognize, at the end of the performance of Waitress, they had a audience participation karaoke night
Whoa.
where the people were invited to pay, I think it was $100 fee to enter to have your Broadway debut and sing a song from Waitress on the Broadway stage with the band that had just performed Waitress. And that was kind of fun.
Wow, that was neat.
I didn't actually sing the Waitress songs. I didn't pay up the money to do that. There were about, I don't know, probably 50 or 60 people that went to the front of the auditorium and were lined up to do it. And I just didn't want to stay that long.
Yeah.
Because it was a really late night already. And
Man.
we
So
wanted
just,
to.
they don't have like a cutoff. They just let all those
Yeah,
people do it.
anyone that wanted to pay the amount.
I mean, 50 or 60 people, that's a good chunk of change that they just
right.
made.
It was a charitable event. So
Yeah.
it wasn't like they were just banking or anything.
Yeah,
They
that's good.
were-
But that's a good amount of money. Yeah.
It was awesome.
That's a lot of people.
And obviously, there were some people on the stage that were great and some people that were a little bit less than great and probably shouldn't have been singing
But
karaoke in
Their
front of a
heart
million
was
people.
probably in the right place. They probably
Oh,
really
yeah.
loved that song.
Everyone was super fun. And the people that came on and were kind of acting as the master of ceremonies for the karaoke event were so encouraging and exciting, and they built everybody up when they were on stage. And even the people that sang really flat and off key the entire time, they came out with a huge applause. Theater is so supportive, and that audience was really, really encouraging to everybody on the stage. It was neat. So I got to see some of that. And the person that was sitting down the row from us, just next to us in our seats for Waitress, she signed up, and she was one of the first people that sang karaoke, so we waited for her, and she was really good.
Oh, that's
She
awesome.
was fun. It was nice to applaud her and celebrate and act like we actually knew her because we talked with her a little bit in intermission. But yeah, Broadway karaoke, that was fun. I would have
What a great idea.
I would have 100% ponied up if it was Hamilton doing that.
Yeah.
I know those songs well enough. But anyways, moving on to the next day, that was Wednesday of our trip. We got to see our good friend Mike,
Yeah.
who is a friend of the show.
Man, he's a great guy. I'm really glad that you guys got to meet up with him in New York.
Yeah, he was a little disappointed that you didn't get to make the trip. He
Yeah.
sends his love and his
Love you, Mike.
he's giving you a hug, an
Yeah.
air hug
Air
from
hug.
Oklahoma City.
On the podcast, as you can see.
Yes, of course. Mike gave us shall we say, the Hamilton Wall Street tour. Mike works for the Bank of New York Mellon, and if you didn't know, the Bank of New York was started by a guy you might recognize.
Burr?
He did start a bank, but not that one.
Oh, man. I always get these things wrong. I bet it was Washington.
Washington if he started a bank, he probably could afford better dentures.
That's true.
He did not start a bank.
I bet it was Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton started the Bank of New York. And as the business that was started by the $10 founding father, lots of people have donated Hamilton paraphernalia and items and things that are signed by Hamilton, that belong to Hamilton, are now on display here at the Bank of New York Mellon in their
wow.
building on their 18th floor behind security in these vaults
Well,
in
yeah.
their boardroom. So we got to go through security, showed them our IDs, and went in, got the name. They have fancy name tags. We give just a visitor's pass at our work in Oklahoma City, but they took us in, and Mike showed us some really cool stuff. I got to see a letter to Hamilton signed by Washington and read that. It was
Oh,
neat.
man.
We got to see some really fancy stuff. The original clock that was donated to him in 1800 that was designed for Alexander Hamilton was really neat. It's really intricate. We got to see, like, I got way closer than I should have been able to because it felt like the rules in a museum, you're supposed to stand behind the line and the rope and all of that,
Yeah.
but I could walk straight up to it, and I could have grabbed it and touched it, but I was a little too I respected it too much for that. So I got to see this. Apparently, one of Hamilton's great grandsons, I think, donated back to the bank after, just as a memento of what had been going on. So yeah, I got to see a clock that was dedicated to him, one of his writing desks. The John Trumbull painting of him is hanging in their boardroom.
Nice.
They have a pull-out drawers where you can see just some different documents and paintings and pictures of people that have been there and some cool stuff. I read a letter signed by Governor John Jay. That was kind of neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. You know what's strange is when you're famous, everything that you sign becomes famous, becomes like a historical item.
Yeah, that's true.
John Jay was writing this letter about how, like, hey, here's $20 to start the bank or something. And like it was more detailed than that. But it was just a bank note that he signed as governor. So it's
at
like,
least that was like connected to the bank and politics a little bit.
Right.
But like I want to see like the historical letters of Hamilton just being like, hey man, how are you doing? I'm kind of tired today. I'm a little sad. Yeah, I had an apple for breakfast. Anyways, get back to me. Hamilton.
Right. Ham.
A. Ham.
Exactly.
Ooh, actually, ham sounds good. Why am I not eating that? P.S. on the leather.
After Mike showed us a lot of the stuff where he works, he walked us through the financial district and showed us a lot of the historical things around there. Right? I mean, we got to see Ground Zero, and that was kind of a somber place as we're walking through, going through there. There's the Oculus there, the transit hub, which we're trying to get renamed the Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
That'd be a really cool little monument to him, since he doesn't
Definitely
have the same types of monuments that Washington's and Jefferson's have a lot of the time. So yeah, we saw that. We got to visit Federal Hall and walked around there. That's, I mean, the first Capitol building sort of for the United States. And I got to stand where George Washington would have stood when he was sworn in, taking the oath of office up there. I mean,
did you feel any ghost tingles?
I didn't, but I did have some goosebumps.
So that's not where the spirit resides, probably. Then.
Probably not. I was at Mount Vernon, though, recently. Listen to the episode.
Go back. We don't talk about ghosts there.
We then went from there, got lunch at Francis Tavern, which is, I mean, it was really cool to raise a glass to freedom right there where Hamilton and Washington would have been doing it when they would have had some dinners.
Did you raise a glass to freedom?
We raised a glass to freedom, in fact.
Good.
It was nice. I raised a cider to freedom.
I mean,
I hope that
counts. In a glass?
It was in a glass.
You rose a glass to freedom.
There it is.
You did
it. While we were on the way, kind of wandering around, checking out a lot of the stuff that Mike was showing us, we also got to make a detour over to the Defiant Girl statue on Wall Street. Did you see that during the Women's Day and Women's Day? They had a lot of this stuff. Yeah, Mike was telling us a lot about the history of the bull statue there on Wall Street, and how the artist of the bull was really, really upset when this Defiant Girl was put there as this defiant girl who was willing to stand up against the bull of Wall Street that was charging towards her and was just defiantly standing there opposing this. And he was talking about how the artist was really upset because that changes the whole meaning behind the bull that he had when he designed the bull. But the Defiant Girl statue is so cool. And what's fascinating is that even when we were visiting in the middle of the week on a Wednesday in March, it was still crowded as all get out. We had to throw some elbows to get in there to get a picture with the Defiant Girl. I didn't get a good one, so I never posted it on Twitter, but we got up next to it. It was really cool. It was a happening place to see that little Defiant Girl standing up against the Bull of Wall Street. You know, we've been calling this the Dauntless Girl and the Bull of Wall Street, but Twitter just reminded me because it's a moment literally right now on Twitter trending.
Yeah, as we're recording.
I pulled up Twitter and it happened to be there, where it's the Fearless Girl and the Charging Bull of Wall Street. So that, I mean, you probably knew what we were talking about this whole time. Hopefully you did. Yeah. But if not, it's the Fearless Girl statue. And if you're interested, you can look up the moment. Look at hashtag Fearless Girl, hashtag Charging Bull, and you'll see the whole fight back and forth between the rights of the artist who did the Charging Bull and the rights of the artist that did the fearless girl and how the meaning of one is changed by the presence of the other, and how interesting it is, and how the girl was only supposed to be there for a little while, and now it's a longer statement there. So it's fascinating. Neat to say I was there. So I guess that took us through our most of what we did on Wednesday. We got to do a little bit of shopping and sightseeing, just the typical touristy New York stuff. But that evening, we spent our time dressing to the nines and going to the Joffrey Ballet at the Lincoln Center.
Yeah. I think we probably mentioned on the podcast before that your girlfriend Liz teaches dance.
Yes, she danced with the Washington Ballet, she and a couple other companies, and has toured a lot, done a lot. She used to dance in New York quite a bit, but we went there and got to see the Joffrey Ballet. They're usually based in Chicago, I think, and she's going to correct me when I say all the wrong things about it, I'm sure. But they were visiting New York City, and we got to watch their version of Romeo and Juliet, which
nice.
It was interesting. Like, I haven't seen as many ballets as obviously Liz has, but I've always appreciated dance. I've always appreciated visual art and theater and performance art. It's awesome to watch performance art like that.
Being someone that's never really been into dance, that's never watched or attended a dance like that, I often forget that ballets have stories. So when you say something like, "Oh, we saw the Romeo and Juliet one," I'm like, "Oh, they weren't just dancing. There was a story behind it." Oh, okay. But I know that. I just don't think about it.
Yeah, story ballets are kind of a big deal. When you think of the ballet, what do you think of? Nutcracker. It's a story. It's the story that every person who knows one ballet can name the Nutcracker Ballet. But we got to watch the Romeo and Juliet performance, which was nice because obviously I know the story of Romeo and Juliet. I love Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Everyone had to study it. For me, it was 9th grade honors English in Emporia High School in Kansas, and that's where I read Romeo and Juliet for the first time and had to memorize the whole thing. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? 'Tis the east, and my Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. And I should have cheated and looked up the words online beforehand.
Well, that's okay, because I don't think you're allowed to recite any of that on the podcast without there being a hip hop beat behind you.
A hip hop beat, it. Yeah, snaps too. So Romeo and Juliet was fun. I actually laughed during it because Mercutio is a funny character. Romeo's friend. He goes around. They have that whole combat scene when in the Shakespeare play you have the whole moment of "Do you bite your thumb at me, sir? I do bite my thumb, but not at you, sir." And they're just jesting with each other as the Capulets and the Montagues are fighting back and forth. And in the ballet performance of this, Mercutio is actually going up and he kisses the guy on the cheek and then runs away and fights around him. And it's really funny, the types of things they have there. And honestly, it was an emotional thing, because you see this character that's incredibly fun and jovial, and he's jumping around, making fun of people, teasing people. He's a friend of Romeo and the protagonist, but then he dies in the gang fights, and then you see the grief that the two families have as they both point towards their lost family member, and then the anger they have as they point towards each other and engage with each other. One of the other things that the last thing I'll point out about the ballet right now, because I'm not a ballerina, I'm not a ballet expert in any way, but it was interesting the way that this ballet was set, because it was set in a modern day.
Oh, okay.
Not modern day, but more modern day than Shakespeare would have been.
Right.
It was set, I think, during the 40s and 50s.
So not quite the Leonardo DiCaprio version of Romeo and Juliet.
Not quite. Let me check the program here. I have it in front of me because I knew I would need a cheat sheet.
Yeah, you have all these programs and playbills in front of us here. They're really cool.
They are neat, aren't they?
Through them.
Yeah. So the place where they set the first act of the Romeo and Juliet ballet is a street in Italy sometime in the 1930s. So it's interesting to see them walking through the streets, and they had some extras walking in suits and jackets and fancy 1930s dresses. And then the second act opened up, and they were in the 1950s. And the third act, they were sometime in the 1990s.
Oh,
so
wow.
they took the time frame and played some games with it
Yeah,
to kind of
that's cool.
modernize a few things and take us into different styles of this contemporary ballet. It was really neat
Yeah, I
to
like
watch
that.
this. Then we got to meet up on Thursday with our good friends Daphne and June.
Yeah, that's right.
And I mention them right now because Daphne's brother happened to be playing trumpet with he plays for the Joffrey Ballet all the time. And they flew them out to play with them in New York City. And so I got to listen to Daphne's brother on Wednesday night
Oh man, that's
and meet
so
up
cool.
with both Daphne's brother and Daphne and June during the Thursday trip when we were getting ready to see Hamilton. So we all went to a Jewish deli and got to hang out, and it was neat because we got to meet and talk with her brother who was there, and he was talking about the music he's performed with the Joffrey Ballet before and with different groups in Chicago and around the world, and so it was neat to make some of those connections.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It was kind of just funny because Daphne didn't even realize that he was going to be in town at first, right then, and when we told her we were going to see it, it was like the stars aligned. We were not the star-crossed lovers. We had the luck.
It's a small world after all.
Oh, I don't want to start singing that. And anytime someone mentions it, it's in my head for days. Anyways, as I was saying, Thursday was dedicated to Daphne and June and all of us going around the city, and we had some really fun Hamilton-focused events that day too, because we went and visited the Grange.
Oh yeah.
What can you tell us about the Grange, Vinton?
Well, the Grange is one of the places where Hamilton laid his head.
He did lay his head there, and it's apparently the only house that he's ever owned, because remember, he didn't come from the families like Jefferson or Madison or Washington where they inherited a huge estate and a huge plantation. The Hamilton family moved here when Alexander Hamilton moved here, and he built this house. He helped make the plans and constructed it, and this is the only house that he ever owned. And this is the same house that they mention in the musical when they say, let's get a little place in Harlem and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Or let's say that the Hamiltons moved uptown. It's quiet uptown. It's not quite as quiet uptown anymore as it used to be up in Harlem, but it was still quite a fun experience to go tour the house. We got to go on a tour, watched a video, and talked to the tour guide for a while about what was some of the details about this house. And the house itself has gone through some really interesting things. Maybe we should come back and do a 10-minute history sometime about the house itself.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Because, I mean, the house has been moved, physically moved, twice.
Yeah, which is not an easy feat.
Right. And once was with horses and timbers.
Wow.
They-
And it's not like it's like a small trailer house or anything. It's a big house.
It is a big house. And so they apparently had to saw off the portico porches at one point and move it by pulling it with horses. And then they later had this whole orchestrated event to move the house back a little bit closer to its original location because it was smack dab between a church building and an apartment complex. And they showed some pictures of the church building and the apartment complex with Hamilton's house sandwiched in between it. They cut off the porches on the side, and it was just right. No one could have spent a lot of time visiting there because it was just packed. It was.
I wonder where they kept the porches at that time.
I'm not
If
certain.
someone was just like, I'll just take that porch home until you need it.
I'm actually curious about that. I think that some of the external work was remastered at some point. I'm not certain. I know that a lot of the internal work was the original, the original stuff that Hamilton would have touched as he walked through the doorway. So that was kind of neat to be right in that spot. But I know that they had to remaster and rework a lot of the outside pieces. They actually had the front stairs off for maintenance when we were there this time. The first time I visited the Grange was a lot different than this time I visited the Grange because this was one of the stops I made when I visited New York in 2016, right? 2017, 15. Years are hard.
15 or 16?
It was 15. It was December 2015. I got to visit the Grange, but I piggybacked on the tail end of a school group that was visiting the Grange, and apparently it was closed for a private reservation, and I wasn't supposed to be there, so I got in.
I remember this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I came in about a couple rooms, got a few rooms deep, and then someone looked around and were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, are you with this group?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just a." I'm so embarrassed. The thing I said was just, sometimes your mouth speaks before your brain thinks. I said,
That's
no,
usual for me.
I'm not with them. I'm just a fan. I'm like, a fan? What? I'm a fan of this house, of this man, I guess of Hamilton, but
I'm a fan of the Grange.
of the Grange. So yeah, they kicked me out and I had to leave, but I was in the Grange once. This time I got to spend a longer time, talk to the tour guys. I got to tour the
random
house.
security guard recognized you and said, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here. I kicked you out."
They had a picture of me behind the desk.
Do not allow this man in. It's the only one. It's really big. It's actually a painting, a John Trumbull painting of Robbie.
They really captured my likeness quite well.
Yeah.
Stern jaw, the powdered wig.
That you always wear for those who can't see Robbie currently.
Right. So I got to do a number of other random little things. We walked the High Line in New York. It was really neat to see that. Got to just spend some good time catching up. I got to see my sister there. Not very long. My sister Miranda, who lives in New York, is studying at Circle in the Square Theater. She had a cabaret that she was preparing for that weekend, and she had been feeling a little sick, so she didn't want to stay out late. So I understand. I didn't get to see her very much, but
Sure.
yeah, I got to cross paths with her a little, and then the highlight of the trip, the big event that we went there for, was Hamilton, an American musical.
Oh, I was thinking it was going to be something different. Like Little Shop of Horrors.
Little Shop.
Or Cats.
Little Shop of
Was
Horrors.
it Cats?
It was a
Cats.
magical Mr. Mistopheles moment. I've never been able to pronounce that well. Magical Mr. Mistopheles? Mistopheles?
I'm not even going to try.
I can't remember. But the memories we captured were still very important. Even
Now
though we
our
didn't see
listeners are
Cats.
just angry because we made them wait 30 minutes to get to Hamilton, and now we're just pushing
Now we're
it
making
further.
jokes about other musicals.
So, Robbie saw Hamilton the musical.
I did see Hamilton, an American musical. And it was everything I expected it to be and more.
Yeah, can you just tell us briefly was there anything that went past what you could think? Like what went past what you imagined or was different than you had thought when we had talked about it and dived into all this information that really stuck out to you?
Well, I think the thing that hit me the most, and this is something that others have said about Hamilton, an American musical, and so it's not new. I know that, but was that even though I have spent so long dissecting these songs, pulling every little historical detail we can out of these songs and analyzing them and listening to them on repeat, working out to them and crying to them while I drive. I mean, these songs I've spent a good portion of my life now with these songs, but it still felt like I was drinking out of a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
You know? This whole show is so kinetic, so movement focused. I mean, obviously there are those park and bark moments where you park your feet and just belt the song as loudly as you can and
Right.
or as quietly and intimately as you can. Obviously there are those moments, but most of the time the cast and the ensemble is dancing around and is moving, is setting up the stage. They're bringing on new props. They're taking off old props. They're setting everything up. They're moving everything around. They're acting everything out. And it's so much that I can understand why so many people, if they hadn't listened to the cast album, go into this and they're like, oh my goodness, what in the world am I watching?
Yeah.
Everyone would love it, but there's so much there. Even as I knew all of the songs and all the lyrics, I was still finding it hard to know where to put my eyes
Right.
because everything is coming at you at once. And they don't stop after every song to analyze it like we do when we talk about it. They go from song to song to song to song to song, and it is non-stop. I think that whole feeling was just hitting me the entire time that this is moving. This is movement that is personifying the characteristics of Hamilton in the fact that he just pushes ahead. He is that bull of Wall Street who is just going to charge forward, not stopping for anything, and he will absolutely keep pace with the fastest of us. And I felt that when I was watching the musical. It was as if I could have gone through it all and missed a lot of things if I wasn't just trying to take it all in at once.
Maybe that's why they haven't actually released a video version because there's like where do we put the camera? Where do we zoom in at? I don't know. And
Yeah.
I think it would actually be a good use of. I think when I first got a DVD player, I remember there being an option to like look at alternate scenes, but like no movie ever makes use of that. But you could do that here. You could just like push left and you scoot the camera over to
Oh,
watch
wow.
something. That would be a
Yeah.
really cool like interactive feature where you could actually move the camera as it's performed.
That would be
I don't
cool.
know if that's fully possible, but
I don't know. I mean, we could, with 3D printers and everything, I mean, we could do this.
oh, maybe you can do like have a video of like stage left, video stage right, and then you can just put together like multiple TVs and
Yes.
play all of them at the same time.
So now we have a whole situation room with TVs all around you.
Just
You rent
surround
out
you.
you rent out a Best Buy and all the TV screens
is
are on
ridiculous.
this. It is a little ridiculous, but how much? I mean, we're pretty close to holograms, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's what I want.
I thought you were gonna ask how much would I pay for that. And the answer is a lot.
The answer is a leg. I
A
would
leg.
pay a leg for that.
Do you need a leg? Because I'll sell it.
An arm and a leg, maybe. Maybe.
So, was there anything different in this performance? Did they change anything? Was it pretty much what we've always dissected and talked about?
You know, it was very much what I expected it to be. I wasn't caught off guard as if there was something there that I thought, oh my goodness, they changed everything. I'm storming out of this place. It was
Man, throw in the new song,
oh, that would have been cool.
change your name randomly.
No, but it was, I mean, even expecting as much as I expected, it was still just breathtaking. It was captivating. I was on the edge of my seat almost the entire night. My eyes were wide the whole time. I was taking it all in. The thing you mentioned that like something that's new. Obviously, live theater always brings something new. Always brings something unique. I think that there was one moment when Javier Munez, who was the
Yeah,
understudy
yeah.
for Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he followed him up in The Heights and now in Hamilton as the lead role. I'm pretty sure he twisted a couple of the lyrics around, but no one would have ever known it if they hadn't listened to the tracks as often as I had.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second. You flipped those words, but he recovered perfectly as if he was a professional, which he is. He knows what he's doing. And so that performance was awesome. You know, when I see Christopher Jackson, I know he's George Washington, right?
Mhm.
When I see Daveed Diggs, I know he is Lafayette and
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson. When I see these people, Oak, I know who he's supposed to be when he's on stage. I know that. But one of the things that was beautiful about not knowing a lot of the cast members that were there performing now
Yeah.
was that in the opening track, in the title song, Alexander Hamilton, you aren't supposed to immediately know who each of these singers are until they get to the final lines and they introduce themselves. And you
Right.
see, I fought with him. Me, I died for him. Me, I trusted him. All that. You have those moments where they introduce themselves, and Burr finally steps forward saying who he is and the role he plays in Hamilton's life. But since I didn't know immediately who was playing whom, I got to see this and think, oh, is that John Lawrence this time? Is that George Washington this time? Is
That's
this
cool.
going to be Aaron? If I thought about it long enough, then I would have remembered, okay, Burr comes on first, then this person, and I could have put
Yeah.
it together. But I didn't have time to think like that because
Right,
the
right.
show is going. It's showtime, and the show must go on. But let me say one thing about Gregory Traco. He is apparently a stand-in for Aaron Burr and George Washington.
Okay.
He was playing our Aaron Burr that night. And man, the boy can sing and act. He is so good. I am always amazed when you go to a Broadway show and you see that there's the understudy performing, you get disappointed or something with one of the roles, one of the characters one of the actors you were really hoping to see playing a certain character. It would have been really nice to see Brandon Victor Dixon performing the role himself because, after the whole Mike Pence thing, we've gotten familiar with his face.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's kind of neat to see. It would have been neat to see that. But Gregory Traco, not knowing him, not having had any exposure to him whatsoever, I went into this a little hesitant because I thought, okay, who are you? Who's this guy? Prove yourself to me. And boy, did he. He proved himself to me and then some. When he performed Wait For It, his emotional range was phenomenal. His softs to his louds to his happies to his sads to his angries to his quizzicals. His emotions were visible from the first mezzanine where we were. it was easy to make out everything he was doing, and you could hear it, you could see it, the way he carried himself. He owned the stage every scene he was in, and I would have loved to see his rendition of Washington. Having seen him as Burr, I would have loved to see him in that role as
Yeah.
well, because I'm sure he's just great at it.
Yeah.
Another thing about the way Traco performed this is he changes just the emphasis on certain lines. Obviously, with hip hop, you're going to recite things a little bit differently each time you perform it. But when he performed it, he emphasized some of those hype lines from the first act some of those lines that you and I love, like favorite fighting Frenchmen. He comes on and he emphasizes those in a real, he growls those lines. He growled favorite fighting Frenchman, and it was so neat to hear this, because I'm used to hearing the produced original Broadway cast version of it, and you hear it in a new way, and it breathes new life into the music that you already know incredibly well. And so I'm a disciple now. I'm a convert. I think he's great. I love it. Broadway has so much talent from top to bottom that it's amazing. I talked for a long time about Traco, but Javier Muniz himself is so good. I forgot that I was watching him instead of Lynn a couple times, just because he's so owns this role in the way that Lynn owns the role. It's really neat. Let's talk about the sisters.
Yeah.
Lexi Lawson is phenomenal. She's gorgeous. Her voice is amazing. Puts me into such a happy state when I listen to her sing. She's another one that had great emotional range. Like,
Yeah.
you could see her smile, and it was like the spotlight was reflecting off of her pearly whites. It was just amazing to see the happiness that she portrayed on the stage, and the grief and anger she portrayed as Eliza as well. But top to bottom, this playbill was lined with incredible people. Javier Muniz, Lexi Lawson, Gregory Traco. I got to see Brian Terrell Clark doing George Washington. That was fun, because I'd seen a Facebook Live with him when he had first become Washington.
I remember that.
That was kind of neat. Seth Stewart playing the role of Marquis de Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson. I was really hesitant about this, because Daveed Diggs is so brilliant.
Yeah.
That when I saw him come on stage, he looks a lot different than Daveed Diggs does, because Daveed Diggs has this wild hair,
the iconic hair.
And let me show you, Vinton, a picture of Seth Stewart. What do you notice about his hair?
Oh, the lack of it, you mean?
Yeah, he doesn't have it. So it was just different. He came.
That's interesting too, because of the changeover for Jefferson, because you always could tell who he was playing by his hair quite easily.
Yes, and so Seth had a greater weight to portraying the difference between Lafayette and Jefferson, because he doesn't just let his hair out and let it go crazy like Diggs could. But they did use a hairband, like a headband in the second act.
Okay.
There was like a Jefferson headband of sorts. I don't think he had fake hair. I couldn't quite tell. But yeah, he had the band, and it was kind of neat. But he also performed the roles so distinctly. When he was Lafayette, he was amazing. He was a fast rap. When he got to Guns and Ships, I wanted to be on my feet. It was just so good when he was taking the horse by the reins, making the red coats red with bloodstains, and I'm never going to stop until I make it drop, burn up, and scatter the remains. I watch me engage in escape, and I'm raging back to France for more fun. So we came back with guns and ships and sell the balance ships. We rendezvous with Virgin Boat, consolidate their gifts. We could end this war in Yorktown. Cut them off at sea, but for this, there's someone else we need. I know Hamilton, so he knows what to do in the trenches, and fluid and French. So you're going to have to use him eventually. What's he going to do on the bench? No one has more resilience that matches my practical, tactical brilliance. You have to right for you. So now I'm stuttering because I got stuck there, but you can cut that off at any point because it was unnecessary. Here's the thing. Seth Stewart walks on stage, and he is Lafayette. He is owning that. He is stuttering through his speech at first. He's curious. He's a little inquisitive, but brave. And he is actively taking part in every scene he's in. And then when Jefferson walks on stage, he has the strut. And the strut is amazing. The dance is amazing. He's hopping and skipping left and right. He has this very distinctive little gait to the way he's walking and dancing along and singing his jazz with "What Did I Miss?" And he's just so fun and playful and exciting. And then when Javier Muniz confronts him in the first cabinet battle and does the whole "whatever the hell it is you're doing, Monticello," he mocks him with that dance move, and you know exactly what he's doing because it's so characteristic Jefferson for this second act. And so, yeah, I could go on all day about Seth Stewart, but his performance, spot on.
Well, it's so good to hear that these people who have replaced the performers that we've grown to know and love from the Broadway recordings
Hmm.
are doing a great job and are putting a little bit of their own twists on some things and are carrying on the spirit of this musical. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. And in the spirit of legacies, I mean, King George III, performed by Taran Killam when I got to see it. I hadn't heard anything about him when I went into the show, but he was brilliant. He was wonderful. So funny. His expressions and when he's on stage mocking the colonists is really funny. But did you hear the news that the
Yes.
well, good. I guess we don't need to talk about it.
Continue. I'm very excited about it, though. I couldn't wait to say yes.
Well, why don't you say what it is?
Well, the very first King George, Brian Darcy James, is returning.
That's right. He is picking up the scepter again and moving back into the role of King George III. So we have King George III the first on stage, waving the scepter, wearing the crown.
Third the first. It's very complicated.
And speaking of complicated, I mean, a lot of people will hear us talking about Brian Darcy James, and they're like, wait a minute, what about Jonathan Groff? Wasn't he the original? And yes, Jonathan Groff is on the original cast recording, but Brian Darcy James originated this role, played it at the Public, and was incredible, I'm assuming. I didn't get to see him there.
Right.
But I did see him in Something Rotten, and I've seen this guy perform. He is so funny. He did a Facebook video, or no, a Twitter video, I think, of him reading the announcement, his first night back doing Hamilton.
Nice.
Reading the announcement, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending Hamilton, an American musical. Obviously, I didn't pay attention to the announcement because I don't know what he said. It may have been the put away your cell phones, but obviously the king is well known for announcing and welcoming his subjects to Hamilton, an American musical. And so he did that on Twitter, and it was really neat to see that announcement. But yeah, the theater is alive and well. Hamilton is alive and well, and it's in good hands. And Broadway is not short on talent because we got to see a lot of it while we were there.
Nice. So were there any comments perhaps that Liz made about the choreography, about the dance? Did she notice anything, pick up on anything that you hadn't really noticed before?
Well, I kind of wish Liz was able to be here because she does have a much better dance vocabulary than I do. She was explaining some of the things to me, and I mean, I'm pretty sure it was adagio movements and different types of steps and ballet moves and different styles that were, I mean, she could tell you exactly the artist and the studio or the company that made that move famous or something. It's just bizarre, the things she knows. But she was talking, and she said that one of the things that's just so striking is that these are clearly really well-trained dancers. Because these aren't just dancers who are coming in and they learn the moves, just stage movement. These aren't just movers. These are legitimate dancers who have to know how to do the right styles of, and I mean, pirouettes and grand jetés, and I mean, I'm just making up the few words that I know as far as ballet terms.
Well, I'd believe you if you just said that you were just making up those words.
I just made up these words. But I mean, they were. And she talked about how many different styles there were. There was legitimate waltz during Helpless and the ballroom scene. You get to see them doing ballroom dancing. You got to see hip hop, obviously, with a lot of the legs and the arms and the movements that you're doing with hip hop. They had legitimate jazz walking. Like if you saw an actual jazz dance, you would see the type of walking and dancing they did during What Did I Miss when Jefferson storms on stage. And that's something she pointed out, that the dance styles were perfect complements to the music that they were doing. And not in an overshadowing way in any kind, but when there was jazz music in the background, they were doing jazz dancing constantly. When there was ballroom style music, they were doing ballroom dancing, hip hop, and there were lots of different styles and versions of this dance that they were putting together. She also commented on how quickly a lot of the dancers have to move because, I mean, as fast as Lafayette's mouth is moving, their body is moving that fast, and they have to get those movements timed out correctly. And pop and lock, you fool. They have to do all these in the right time and the right place and the right tempos, and everything was so well choreographed, right down to the props. I think I mentioned that the props were coming on stage and off stage, and the dancers were the ones doing that.
Yeah.
If Hamilton's talking about writing, then they will bring out a board and a pen and put it in his hands and set a book in front of him, and they will hold it like a writing desk. And then the next line is talking about something completely different. And the dancers have already moved all of that stuff off, and now there's a chair in front of Hamilton for him to do something else. And it's incredible how all of those props are moved and handed from one person to the next to the next. I mean, when Hamilton writes the Reynolds pamphlet and he gives it to the person next to him and the next to him and next to him, and they pass it around the stage, and it goes up the stairs and back behind the balcony and up to the other side of the stairs, and then you don't know whether it's going to make it down on time because they're handing it so slowly at first and slower, and then they speed up and they just spin around handing each other the pamphlet, and it's incredible the way they pass the props around to one another and finally get everything across the stage. It's just super well choreographed, well integrated. There's no moment when the dance is overpowering to the music. It always fits so perfectly. And that's something that Liz was commenting on. She said that when she saw Newsies, there are some songs that feel like they're excuses for a dance number, excuses for an ensemble piece. I mean, we're going to have a song in here so that we can all get together and showcase this is our tap dancing song, or this is our song where we get to do this style of music, and then we get the big movement piece out there. But this isn't one of those shows. It's about the lyrics. It's about the lines. And there are moments when the dancing is completely literal, acting out what is happening. You see the person pantomiming his cousin dying and hanging himself. And you see the dancer who moves the chair on stage, spins onto this chair. I don't know how he didn't fall off the chair spinning, puts the noose around his neck, pantomiming again, and hangs himself there like his cousin, then leaps off, takes the chair with him, and so gracefully transitions to the very next thing like nothing ever happened. And so this fluid movement is just so well put together. And Liz was pointing out how these have to be good dancers, well-timed dancers, well-trained dancers, and obviously trained in several different styles of movement. She did as a dance studio owner and someone who does this for a living. She did point out there are a couple moments when there are some slightly out of sync movements. I mean, obviously some of that comes with hip hop, but you typically want, and I'm gonna butcher the descriptions of these things, so I'm not gonna try to make it in dance terms, but when your arm is at a certain angle, you want all of your arms to be at the same angle. You want your legs to be at the same angle at certain times and certain movements. And there are times when you break that intentionally, and there are times when you keep that specifically. And there's moments where it felt like the choreographer wanted it to be kept. They weren't exactly at the same perfect, pristine angle. And so having seen the Joffrey Ballet the night before, that was probably standing out even more because I could see that in the moments, because Hamilton's dancers are very different than Joffrey's dancers, even though they're both very well trained and good at what they're doing.
So it sounds like you had a blast finally fulfilling this dream of getting to see Hamilton live in person and getting to see it with some great friends and, of course, your loved one.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this, but Mike Frietta, the guy who showed us the Hamilton Wall Street tour, he met us right outside the theater as I was walking out. He happened to be, I mean, he's a busy man. He had just had a newborn, so he doesn't get to have a night on the town very often. But we happened to pick a week to visit when his wife and newborn were on vacation. So he was a little freer, and he was able to hang out with us longer and see us in town. And so he tweeted to me right beforehand and said he happened to be in Manhattan for another meeting, and he was going to meet us outside to catch exactly what our reactions were like when we left the theater. And so as I was walking out, I saw him right there, and it was just a huge grin and fun moment to get to see him. And it was neat to be able to see the wonderful people there. I do want to say again a great thank you to our friend Daphne Olive, who was able to get the tickets in advance and said, "Hey, do you want to buy these tickets?" Because she had this opportunity to get it that I would have never had easily. And so we were able to buy some tickets through her really quickly, and it worked well. And I got to go with some friends, got to spend time with her and her daughter and meet her brother. And so thanks, Daphne. We love you. And
yeah, you're the greatest.
You are the greatest. We appreciate you. If you as a listener want to learn about Daphne Olive and if you want to fall in love with her as well, she is the brilliant mind that brings you all of the thoughts on Twitter and on podcasts about the TV show Black Sails, and she has a podcast on the Common Room Radio Network where she is talking about Black Sails. If you want to look her up, it's Fathoms Deep, a Black Sails podcast.
That's right. And I've heard that she is going to be transitioning from that as they come to an end on that podcast and doing some more podcasting. So be on the lookout for that because she's brilliant and you'll love to hear her talk about all the things she loves.
She's so brilliant, and everything she does is, everything she says is encouraging. She's such a fun person when you see her. It's exciting. So I got to see some fun people, got to build the friendships. Thanks again to Mike for giving us the tour, showing us around, getting us into those places that we wouldn't have been able to see if you weren't there. And so thanks a lot for that. Thanks a ton for all the support on Twitter, the recommendations for, right down to visiting Francis Tavern made me want to go there. There are people on Twitter that were reaching out about places to go, things to see. But yeah, great trip, great friends, great fun. Now I'm back, and I'm missing the theater scene already. I want to go back. I wanted to see, there's so many things I want to see. Anastasia, Aladdin. There's so much on Broadway that I would love to see.
Yeah. It'd be nice to live where you could just go or I guess have a job that could pay for it as well.
Yeah. That's true. As a visitor, I saw a lot more Broadway shows than I probably would be able to see as a native.
Right.
It's kind of the thing about being in New York. You live there, and so you don't do the touristy stuff or the show visiting all as often. But it was a great trip, and the only thing that could have made it better is if you came along.
I know.
So next time.
So that was Robbie's trip to see Hamilton. Now we have some news.
Yes, and this is, probably going to be bittersweet news to a number of our listeners. I think it might come as a surprise to some and not to others, but why don't you tell us what this is?
Yeah, so we have covered Hamilton, an American musical, in full, and we have covered Hamilton, the mixtape, now in full. And when looking forward in the show and thinking of all the things we want to do and looking at our lives and other things we want to do, other podcasts that we do and that we want to do, and all of this, we've decided to stop making Hamilton the podcast as a ongoing show. This doesn't mean it's over completely 100%. We do want to come back every once in a while and do some kind of special, especially when there's some kind of big Hamilton news, maybe a second mixtape, or when possibly we're going to see In the Heights maybe here in town.
That's
and
right.
We might want to talk about that afterwards.
Yeah, local Lyric Theater is doing a production of In the Heights, brought in the choreographer that worked with it in both Texas and Chicago. But so we've got some ideas on the horizon. This isn't the end of Hamilton, the podcast, but it is the end of the regular episodes.
Yes. So this is the last regularly occurring episode. From now on, there will be bonus episodes that pop up in your feed if you stay subscribed. Mm-hmm. You can follow us on Twitter. We'll be dropping links to those as they come up or telling you when we're going to be doing those at that time.
And if you ever do feel like there's a hole in your heart and you're really missing hearing Vinton's voice in your earbuds every week or every other week, then we're going to tell you in a minute how you can track us down. But also, if something Hamilton related does come up and you want us to cover it, feel free to shine your GraphoCast bat signal, call out to us on Twitter and say, hey, Vinton and Robbie, have you seen this book deal that was signed with Christopher Jackson? And I would read that book.
Yeah.
I would absolutely do that.
Definitely hit us up with things that you want us to talk to you about on Twitter. Whether we do an episode on it or not is I'm not sure, but we'd be open to hear from you for sure and hear your suggestions and hear what you want. That'd be great.
So again, we will come back with occasional episodes when we get to see In the Heights, when we get to, if we happen to read a book that relates to this we love, if we are just obsessing about something historical that we want to talk about, we'll drop it into this feed. But we have had an absolute blast doing Hamilton the podcast, and we're looking forward to some new fun projects as well in the future, and we hope you follow us there.
So I know technically this isn't a last episode, but since it kind of is, Robbie, looking back on the podcast, what has this meant to you and what have you gained from doing this?
Well, that's a great question because this podcast has been so much of our passion and so much of our hard work and our research has been poured into this over the last, over a year now
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Hard to
doing this.
believe.
It has been over a year since we launched that first stuttering episode where we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know what was happening.
Yep. I was just a new podcaster. I barely knew how to make podcasts at the time.
You had podcasted a little bit with your in-laws.
Yeah.
And
that was
besides that was all. And so we were trying this out as pioneers in our own right. And I for one didn't have any expectation of where this would go, what would happen. I thought we would just get to nerd out with each other and no one would listen but my dad, maybe.
And he does.
He does.
Hi, Mr. Herlocker.
Hi, Dad. We both just waved at the microphones.
That's what you do. I'm a professional podcaster.
Professional podcasters now. I mean, I didn't expect that there would be, a quarter of as many people have listened.
Right.
Now when I'm sitting here across the kitchen table from you with these microphones plugged into the soundboard and the computer, and we're talking here in your dining area at your house, I don't think about the fact that there are 27,000 people listening to my voice, and there are that many people that have listened to downloaded a couple of our episodes. Unless my dad is listening to an episode over and over and over, I don't know, maybe he hasn't learned how to download it.
Listened to our first episode 27,000 times?
I don't know.
I think those are original listens. I don't think it'll count more than one listen.
I don't know. We'll have to look in the stats.
Maybe he's getting different accounts. He has 27,000 iTunes accounts?
He has the pay stubs from separate accounts. Almost 1,000 listens paid in different amounts. So this is something that has meant a lot to me. To be honest, it's been an opportunity to just on a regular basis make sure that I have a sit down with you, my best friend. We get to talk about something we love. We're talking over microphones. We get to just share our passion for something, hold each other accountable at times to research and dive into something and hold the schedules together. It's just fun to have this, and it's been so much that had to go into it. But for me, I don't think it'll come as a surprise for anyone that I have an obsessive personality. I have to say no to drugs because if I said yes to any of them, I don't know what would happen. I have to say no to video games because if I play one video game, I have to finish all the storylines. And nowadays, you can't do that with a video game.
Yeah.
I stood in line for the midnight release of Skyrim when it came out, and that was the last video game I played in full because it just owned my life. I realized I'm a grown-up. I can't do this, and I can't do that. So anyways, when it comes to musicals I love, this is the one that I have been able to obsess about the most. I've been able to indulge that obsession and that passion, but it springboarded me into finding new things I love. Because while I'd read biographies before and I loved history, I loved learning, I've read more biographies and more history books in the last year and a half than I've ever read voluntarily in my entire life.
Me too, but I've read a lot less than you.
But it's meant something that it's given me a goal. It's given me something to work towards.
Yeah.
It's given me something to investigate and analyze and research. When I hear one phrase about the Battle of Yorktown, it's given me a reason to read 15 different books about it, go to the library book sale. And did you see my haul from the library book sale this year?
Yeah.
It was, it's silly. And last year was similar. I load up on these 50-cent and dollar books of all the history books I can find.
Right.
And then, anyways. So it's meant that I've been able to learn a lot. And I've learned that I've helped rediscover how much I love learning. And I hope that that's something that a lot of our listeners get as well, because when we dive into this, we're nerding out, we're geeking out, we're just sharing the things we love and the things we're passionate about. But we've also been able to share some of the things we've learned and found interesting about this. And I've learned from some of our listeners sharing articles, sharing posts with us. And I think that that's one of my favorite things about this is finding other people that are passionate to learn and that are passionate about the music side of things as well. The history is amazing. The music is amazing. The community is fun. And it's meant so much because it's helped me to rediscover some of the things I love, helped me dive into the passions that I care about, and help me to justify reading all of those books back to back instead of when I could have been more productive at the house mowing the yard, I instead chose to read a book because I had that I needed to do it for the podcast, and so it was a good excuse to do something I wanted to do anyway. So, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, this, like I already mentioned, was the show where I basically learned how to podcast. As we grew as a show, I don't go back and listen to those early episodes because I'm almost afraid that I'll just be so upset by how bad I did.
Yeah,
and like I didn't actually do enough research and we didn't actually dive into enough facts that I would have wanted to because we didn't know what we would be doing at that time. We hadn't fully planned it out like we grew into this research and we grew into wanting to dive deeper and deeper into the histories. And
I always think about that when it comes
Yeah.
to introducing people to our podcast. I'm like, yeah, listen to our first episode, but maybe listen to something you're interested in later instead. Because,
yeah,
we
I almost
didn't
feel
know.
bad because so many people do start with the first episode and I almost want to go back sometimes and like re-record the first episode.
No.
But yeah, I learned how to do research for podcasts using this.
Yeah.
I do so many podcasts now where I have to research and it's so easy for me now. I have methods of doing this, but I taught myself those methods by doing Hamilton the podcast and reading different books and looking at online articles, watching YouTube videos, and just researching the heck out of things and taking notes and outlining them in such a way that I could keep track of it as we talked without just reading off a bunch of facts and making it boring.
It's true. You do show up. It just a little behind the curtains of Hamilton the podcast. Vinton shows up with analyzed notes and footnotes and links to the articles where he found them, and I show up with occasionally I'll bring a stack of books and a couple book like dog-eared corners, and I'm like, and as you lead us through, I'm like, wait a second, I think I have a quote. Let me find something. Hold on. This guy said something. I'm just recalling the things I read because I obsess about it. But then you keep us on point. You keep us structured. You keep us together, and then you make us sound halfway decent because you edit it as well.
Well, and I have to because I can't bring things to mind like you can so quickly. I have to have some notes in front of me, otherwise I will forget at least half of the things I wanted to say. I just can't keep them in my head like that. I've never worked like that. So note taking is very important for me. I've come to learn, and it's a great skill I've picked up from this.
And it's good.
And
you're good at it.
I got to dive into some amazing history. I got to learn a lot about history and a lot about how social justice is reflected in that. We got to talk a lot about that. And because of that, I got to read a lot of really awesome articles from a lot of genius minds out there who are thinking about these important issues, who are diving into them and contemplating the effects of our histories and why it matters. And it's so important. It's so great. Oh man, it gets me so excited. Let's just keep doing the podcast.
Yeah, now we want to.
But we do have to move on to other things. We both have lives. We both have busy lives.
Yeah.
And we want to spend time with each other where we don't have to just record.
True.
So that is one thing. And we have other things that we want to do as well. New projects we want to move to. New and bigger things. Always moving, always changing. So we do have to regretfully say goodbye to this podcast as a reoccurring constant. Yeah. But hopefully we will be able to come back and do some really fun things in the future. Maybe we'll come back sometime for a special Q&A. If you guys want to drop us some questions, maybe we'll come back and do some more histories. If you give us some hints on what you'd like to hear, what you'd like us to talk about. And of course, there's always more musicals, and Lin-Manuel Miranda will probably be doing a lot more things, and we'd like to talk on those things.
Yeah. Does that mean we can do a Moana episode someday?
It calls me. So yeah.
That's pretty fun. I mean, yeah, this isn't the end of our Hamilton obsession, but it is the ending of this chapter, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so more things are going to happen. Vinton, if people want to hear more of you, where would you point them? If you want to listen to podcasts with Vinton, where can they go?
Well, mostly check out my Twitter because I'm going to be putting those in my bio, usually either a hashtag or a link somewhere in there. And I'm at FleshEater on Twitter. Most of my shows can be found on the Graphomania Podcast Network. That's at graphocast.com, graphocast.com. Those are all on YouTube, Stitcher, Google Play, or iTunes. And just to list them off real quickly, The Hancock Creative Show is right now on hiatus, but we're thinking about doing a relaunch there. But all those episodes are still up. It's about encouraging creative people. The Read Brave Comics podcast is the comics podcast I do that's community built. It's gotten even more community built because now we're doing some guest host stuff. We're doing some new segments. We're getting interviews with big time creators like Colin Bunn, who writes for X-Men right now.
I saw that.
And
that's exciting.
Kelly Thompson, who's writing for Hawkeye right now, the Kate Bishop Hawkeye. And oh man, it's been so fun to do these great interviews. And of course, you and I get to play on Botchcast, our tabletop role-playing podcast, where I play Spider-Man and sometimes Vision, and you play Quicksilver.
And sometimes Black Panther now.
I
don't think that we've released any episodes where we've done the other character yet.
Yeah, no. Maybe by the time you're hearing this, there'll be something.
Yeah,
Depends
maybe.
on when you're listening.
That is a fun podcast on the network where we get to we play Marvel superheroes and pretend that we're saving the day or destroying the world.
Often,
maybe
on accident.
Oopsies. Sorry. Didn't mean to set that bomb off over upstate New York.
On top of that, I do a couple of shows with the Common Room Radio Network. We did a Firefly show where I got to geek out about one of my favorite TV shows. That's over because the show only lasted a season, so you can only talk about it so much.
Right.
But I got
Stupid
to talk
Fox.
about that. It's called Mighty Fine Shindig. And currently I'm doing a comic book podcast over there where we dive into either a comic book movie, a comic book TV show season, or a story arc. And we just geek out and talk about it, kind of like we did with Firefly. With Sarah and Alistair Stevens over on that network. It's called Excelsior, and it's a lot of fun as well.
Speaking of comic books, have you seen the new Ragnarok trailer?
Oh, yeah. Actually, on Excelsior, we just dropped a 30-minute mini episode.
About the trailer?
30-minute mini episode. We said at the beginning, we'll probably talk for about 10 minutes, but we'll see. And we talked 30 minutes on this, minute and a half long
I could have told you it was going to be that
teaser.
long.
Yeah,
I mean, we have 45-minute, 10-minute histories.
Oh, man. It's so good. I'm so excited about that movie.
Ragnarok's going to be fun. It should be interesting.
Yeah, those are the places that you can find me.
So you're obviously a lot more prolific in the podcasting world than I am. I mean, you started this network. I mean, that's what you do. You're the podcast entrepreneur. I should have thought of this and made up a podcastpreneur. I don't know. That sounds like
some
manure.
kind of portmanteau there.
I should have thought of that. That was a wasted opportunity. What a waste. But I'm going to be doing some guest episodes here and there and a couple different things. One of our friends runs the Chipperish Podcast Network, and she has invited me to talk about an episode of The West Wing.
Yeah.
If you are interested in West Wing and the old show from the late 90s, early 2000s, you should check it out. It's called Jed Bartlett is My President. It's a podcast about the West Wing and denial, where for just an hour each week, she gets to talk with a special guest about the West Wing and pretend for just that hour that the worst thing happening in the West Wing is whatever happened on that episode that week, instead of Donald Trump and the White House. We try to pretend that he doesn't exist and pretend that Jed Bartlett is our president, the kind-hearted progressive who runs our country from the West Wing. So I'm going to be on an episode of that. I think it drops May 3rd, but definitely just be checking it. I think the hashtag is JBIMP. It's on for Jed Bartlett is My President. It's on the Chipperish Media platforms. And so check it out. And obviously all the stuff she does there is amazing. But I'm also kicking around the idea still of launching with hopefully some of your help and one of our good friends, and potentially a family member of mine, but we're going to dive into this a little bit with the details later, but we're talking about still launching this Hopefully Not Heretics theology podcast where we dive into Christian theology from an intellectual standpoint and a research standpoint and a philosophical standpoint, but also with the practical applications of where it takes you in life.
Right.
Some of it just for the research side of things of saying, okay, well, you've heard what Ken Ham thinks about Genesis 1, right? Young Earth, creationism, whatever. What historically has that text been interpreted to mean? What has, throughout the life of the Bible, what has it been interpreted to say? And so just looking historically at the text, looking at the text as literature, diving into the text, because that's what my degree is in biblical studies and research.
Right.
And so
that's what my half of the degree is in.
Right. And so we have some opportunities there, but I want to dive into just different things with the creation myths of the Bible and the history of the church and different portions of biblical interpretation and method there. And we have some really fun ideas that we're kicking around, and so I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. We're going to look at biblical poetry and biblical literature and different genres. And so, yeah, follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Alpha Knight, and we'll get that up and running. It's probably going to include a blog post and Twitter and maybe some YouTube seminars. We'll see where it goes from there. So some potential stuff on the radar. Really what I have on the radar that I'm most looking forward to is being able to schedule time with Vinton that means we can just watch a movie or something.
Yeah.
Or just watch a TV show together. I mean, I watched the first episode of Legion with you, and that was
a lot of
all
fun.
we had time to do. I haven't watched the rest of it yet. But really, we don't get to hang out as often unless we're recording, because we feel like it's a waste. We have to record while we're together.
That's right.
But now I'm just looking forward to just sitting outside in some chairs, having some fun, watching TV in the living room, doing whatever we can to just actually hang out again. So looking forward to some good free time. I hope that you as our listener are not too disappointed. Like we said, this isn't the end of Hamilton the podcast. It's just the end of a chapter and the end of our regularly recurring episodes.
And I would like to take a moment to thank everyone who has donated to make this happen. Financially, I could not have done this without you. It is because of our Patreon supporters and those who have donated money even outside of Patreon that this podcast was allowed to happen. I don't make enough money to run a podcast network on my own.
Yeah.
And the Graphomania Podcast Network still does need Patreon contributions. This show still needs your Patreon support so that the website and the episodes can stay up and available for all to hear and for you to re-listen to whenever you want, as well as for us to come back and do intermittent episodes in the future. So if you'd like to give your support to the Graphomania Podcast Network, check out patreon.com/graphocast, GRAPHOCAST. So from Hamilton, the podcast, one last time for now, I'm Vinton Bain.
And I am Robbie Herlocker. See you on the other side.
Teach him how to say goodbye. This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, GRAPHOCAST.com. Follow us on Twitter at Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.